All right, so Matt, man, I really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule and come out and talk to us. And I learned your name. I've heard your name, like we mentioned before, in casual conversation with people. But Roy Heatherly came out to our sales meeting and started kind of laying out a foundation. If you're ever around Roy, I mean, I don't know that I've ever heard the man say anything negative, but he has got an energy for our community. And when we started talking about the workforce that we have and the needs that we have, he just went on like a several minute, just in depth on Matt is really stepping up and making things happen. And I know it's not just you alone doing it, but it takes that driving force. And from what I'm hearing, you're that driving force that really is champion our workforce. So Matt, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, yeah, I mean, Roy he's an exciting person.
He is.
You can't be around him long and have a bad day, I can tell you that. But I was born and raised in Monroe, went to Neville High School, played ball, had an opportunity to go play college ball at Central Arkansas, and did that for 4.5 years and graduated and really thought that I was getting into business. I had a friend of mine that was doing logistics and thought that was kind of a company that I might ease into. And I graduated in business with a business degree. And I didn't know it at the time, but kind of going into my senior season, I'd spent some time back at Neville helping them coach their spring training. And that time really kind of opened my eyes to an opportunity of working with young people. And I love the sport of football.
Right.
And early on, I could tell you that, that's what I was a football coach. And that was kind of where my identity was for a while. But I had a conversation after I graduated with Mickey McCarty, who's now the principal of Neville High School.
Right.
And he said, look, I understand you love football, and I know you're passionate about that. He said, but you got to handle your business across the street. And, of course, he was talking about teaching. And I really took that to heart. And I feel like playing under Coach McCarty and just the values that he set for us as players, and then coming back and being able to coach with him, he's taught me a lot in our relationship. And some of that is centered around, wherever you are, be there and be good at it and give all your energy to it. And that's really kind of, I've held on to that through the years. So I started coaching and teaching and started teaching in physical science. And like most coaches, one of these elective classes type things. And though I was passionate about it, I really started to discover some passion towards this, what they call CTE, Career and Technical Education, when our principal came up to us, and it was Whitney Martin at that time. She said, hey, do you want to teach a small engines class? And I was like, well, sure. What does that look like? And that was early in the Jump Start, which is the state Louisiana Department of Education's CTE program. And
so at that time, there was not a program like this in the Monroe City school system.
Not in Monroe City. Ouachita Parish and a lot of rural parishes has FFA, which is, they have the agriculture and those things. And we didn't have those programs inside Monroe City. We were primarily, everybody was kind of college bound and university bound. And so the elective type trade classes really didn't exist to any kind of scale. We had a couple of shop classes and carpentry type things, but nothing that was kind of aligned with industry. And so that's where really the education and workforce train started rolling for me was in that small engines class. And then talking to our kids, I just said, hey, what do y'all want to do? Do y'all like the engines? Do you want to do something different? And then they started talking about welding. We want to learn how to weld. And next year, started a welding class.
So with that program, was there I know the kids were developing a skill, but was it at a level to where they could utilize this skill for to go right into a job at that point? Were they getting enough information through that to?
They were getting kind of what I would say some foundational information on four-stroke engine repairs and working through different things, working with carbonators and how to clean out engines and clean stuff and service engines, and if they finished the program, there was a certificate there. But what I realized is we really hadn't done the legwork on the front end with business and industry to say, hey, I've got 10 kids, where can I place them, right? The class is one thing, and taking up time during the classroom and during the school day is one thing, but to really make it meaningful is how do we connect business and industry with this? And that was something that we really hadn't done, not just for Monroe City, but really across the state at that point. Is like we knew we needed workforce development, and we knew we needed it now. And we kind of took a jump and ran right into the certification piece without a lot of the legwork with the connecting industry to those certifications to know, hey, when you finish, this class at Neville, you can go work for a 3B Outdoors or a Twin City outdoor equipment. So there was some growing pains early on with some of those programs, but it was really kind of transitioned into the welding, and then the welding grew, and that grew in popularity. And
so, how did the kids? How did they receive this? This is something new you guys are rolling out. How well received was it at the time when y'all first got it started? Did you have a lot of kids like, yes, I want in on that, or?
Yeah, we had a lot of interest in it because we got to make things. We got to play with fire and all the fun stuff that comes with it. Obviously, there's a lot of dangerous things you have to be careful for when you do that in a school setting.
You don't want to lose a kid.
That's right. Nobody wants to cut a finger off. But there was a lot of interest from the students because it was, hey, I did this with my grandfather, or hey, I did this with my dad, or hey, we're working on this at the camp. There was a lot of those stories where they felt like, hey, I've got a program that I can come in and really learn something that I can take outside of school. And that's the challenge with education, right? As kids are, what am I here for? Why do I need this? When will I ever use that?
Correct.
With the skill trade classes, you really didn't have to answer that question because they could see where welding could take them. They knew the companies in the community. They could see where the healthcare classes led to a hospital and a career in healthcare. Like, those things really spoke for themselves, which I think is why there's so much interest in those CTE type classes at an early age.
So you spent, I believe, 9 years in education, and was it at that point that Entrepreneurial Spirit came in and like, we need to try something different?
Yeah, I tried to connect the dots, just kind of reflecting back, and the Lord's done a great work in my life, and it's been a crazy journey, kind of like you said. Like, there's a lot of things that's happened over a short amount of time, and but one of those things is, I think I've always had an entrepreneurial spirit and kind of a leadership type position through football and athletics, and like I said, being around great coaches and just kind of that push and motivation through all those years, I think is paying dividends now in a lot of areas. But yeah, I had an opportunity in 2018 to it was kind of like see a need, meet a need, right? I was doing the welding class at Neville, and we were getting a lot of these, hey, can you fix this? Hey, can you repair that from outside the community, parents and everybody else. Well, then we made the mistake, but we created the opportunity for CNC plasma cut signs. And so custom metal signs became like we were doing camp signs and gates, and it seemed like left and right. You could cut a tiger head out of steel and sell it for whatever price you wanted. And people really ate it up. So I was sitting there on a Saturday, and I think it was during the Christmas holiday, and I was up there on the weekend working, trying to get a fire pit out for Christmas or doing something that the kids didn't get a chance to finish. And I'm like, man, this is great. And this is great for our school. This is great for the things that we're doing. But there's a business opportunity here. Right. And this was 2017, 2018. And like, I don't know if you remember those years, but people were ordering those, monogrammed initials. It was like the popular thing.
Right.
Everybody had the steel sign hanging on their door. And so I took a chance, went to the bank and said, hey, look, I'm going to go buy this table. I had a buddy of mine that had some shop space that he was going to let me use for a period of time. And when I tell you, from the time that plasma table hit the ground, business just kind of took off. And we were very blessed to grow out of that operation and move into a building on Washington Street. And it was just kind of one step, cookie crumb after the other. And then in 2020, right in the middle of the pandemic, had an opportunity to buy a company in Arkansas and do an industrial fabrication. And I remember walking through that shop, and I was looking around at all the equipment, going like, man, I wish Legacy, which was the company I started in 2018, I said, this is probably us in 20 years. If I could dream of a entrepreneurial type spirit. And looking around the press brakes and the big rolls and the plenty of square footage. I mean, it's 60,000 square feet of playground for somebody like me. And took a chance and closed that deal and started that kind of revamping that company, and did that, grew it, and had an opportunity to exit back in January. And, good, bad, and different, you learn a lot in a short amount of time when you start running operations like that. And
You learn an awful lot,
Awful
especially
lot.
when the buck stops with
That's
you.
right.
And you're talking like in the pandemic that
Yeah.
you purchased this, and
Yeah.
there's thoughts to does everybody have to go home? Am I
Yeah.
going to be able to survive in this environment?
That's
So
right.
there's a lot of growing up that happens really quick.
Yeah. And that's one thing we had talked about prior to kind of, signing on the dotted line, I guess, is, hey, look, this pandemic was going to end at some point.
Right.
And industry at that point had kind of started to close and
Mm-hmm.
was kind of ticking back up. And I was just kind of paying attention, and you pay attention to things around you, and they'll tell you what you need to hear. And started saying, like, industry can't stay shuttered for long.
Right.
Like, the economy needs to come back.
It's got to get rolling again.
There's things that have to come back. And so that's really, I tell people, like, we played the hop, right? We don't know where it's going to go, but we're going to take a chance. We're going to sign on this dotted line in 2020 that in 2021 it's going to come back. And really, we were blessed to say that did happen, and then there was more opportunities and more things happening. And so that was a growing season. That was a great opportunity to learn and learn and travel the country and see how other parts of the country are doing, from workforce development to business and economic development and all these
But
things.
it also gave you a firsthand look to what makes a company thrive, and if you have an organization that is built on service, where either you're producing a product or you have employees that have to get things done so that product, that service can be completed, you start learning really quickly. It's kind of hard to find quality trained people that really want to work. I know they're out there, but they're not necessarily the easiest to find.
That's right.
So you got a firsthand look at workforce development, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, for our industry, we did a lot of field operations, and so the more people that we could supply, the more work that we had, and that's where really the numbers game started to be revealed. Is like, if you've got people, you've got the work, because the work's out there, the opportunity's out there. It's the companies that are trying to think differently when it comes to workforce development that are really. You could probably look back at a lot of acquisitions in the business community and go, that was a human acquisition. It had nothing to do with really the product or the service. It was because they had 50, 100, 150 people. And that was just the easiest way to capture a large number of people and bring them into your company. And so that was always the question with mergers and acquisitions is when you look at companies gobbling other companies up, it's simply a human capital thing that's taken place over the years. And so traveling and seeing all that, it really kind of gave me some perspective when I got out to come back and go, hey, not only is it going to benefit us, and like the company I'm with now with Pulp Mill Services, like, we need people in a bad way. And our company can grow exponentially when we have those people. But more than that, our community can grow because companies like ours can put people to work, and we can pay them really well in a lot of these careers. And that's where the workforce development and economic development, in my mind, really start to come in. Everybody likes the economic development piece because that's the new dirt, the new building, the new things, the ribbon cuttings.
But if we can't save what we already have, we're not going to be able to attract anybody to build anything new. Now, when Roy was kind of describing when you got brought into Pulp Mill Services, what was the actual title of position that they brought you in as?
Strategic Marketing Manager.
So I don't think he had the strategic end, but it was like marketing manager. Yeah. And then he's like, but he didn't come in there to sell a product.
That's right. It was a strange relationship.
But I mean, it was, so whoever was at Pulp Mill that made that decision to bring you in has got to be one smart individual.
Absolutely.
But to be able to have someone that can think that from a marketing standpoint, I need somebody that can find me the labor that is going to continue to produce the product our company is known for and do it efficiently and have a good time while they're doing it.
That's right.
So it was just really eye-opening when he talked about how a company's vision when it comes to marketing, it's nothing about sales at that point.
That's right.
It's finding quality people that we can bring in or figure out how we can get quality people. Yeah. So tell us about kind of how that conversation started to get you in to Pulp Mill and kind of what that looked like for you.
Well, a friend of mine, Justin Marsh, Justin and I go to church together, and obviously we've spent some time together over the years, and we've always had a mutual respect for each other professionally. And we had a company in Arkansas, and they've got that company. We work in similar industries, but we were never really direct competitors. I think some people thought we were, but Pulp Mill Service is a whole nother side of the industry than what we did in Arkansas. And so Justin and I started talking kind of as the transition out of that company started happening. And he said, look, I know here's some things that we need as a company. We need this community involvement. We need a workforce piece. We need to, we don't really need to go sell. We've got the sales piece, and we've got great customers, and we're delivering great products to. But this awareness of who we are, right? This workforce piece is really caught up to companies like Pulp Mill, and there's hundreds and hundreds of companies just like ours that are going, hey, we've got to do something on this workforce piece. And so when you think about marketing, most people first go into marketing going, well, I got to sell this cup, right? Or I got to sell this pen. And really, that's not what our marketing is designed to. Our marketing is to recruit. It's to retain. It's start to bring people in to go, hey, I want to work there. That's a place that we can go share our values, and I can go and grow in that community inside that company. And so that was really the tailored that we kind of pitched in our early conversations was, hey, let's take a different approach on marketing. Right. Let's look at it this way. And then Justin and Ronnie is Justin's dad, and Ronnie's got the industry story of starting on his tools and working the trade and traveling the country and growing a company from 5 employees to 150 plus employees. And it's that work ethic when you start mixing some of these new innovative thoughts of how to start retaining people and grow a company that really makes for something special. And so I tell people all the time, I'm tremendously blessed to work for a company that's got an ownership in not only their company succeeding, but the community succeeding. And I think that's just the message that I get to share is that yes, we're marketing, we're trying to recruit people in, but we're not just saying, hey, gimme, gimme, gimme. We're at the table with the LDCCs and the ULMs and these workforce boards saying, how can we help? How can we apply some influence and some pressure to these community partners to really kind of see some change in this workforce development initiative?
So then from that standpoint, how did you get involved in NELA MAC? And then can you just kind of give us a brief overview of what NELA MAC is?
Sure. So NELA MAC is the Northeast Louisiana Manufacturers Alliance and Consortium.
And that's why I called it. Yeah, I called it NELA MAC for a reason.
That's right. So we call it NELA MAC for short, but NELA MAC was raised up October a year ago. So coming up, we're on our 1-year anniversary. And really, it was companies like Sawyer Plastics, like Mid-South Extrusion, like Bancroft Bag and Steel Fab and Pulp Mill. And this was before I'd come on board. So Ronnie and Justin were at the table going, hey, how can we bring industry together and kind of identify these are the things and the values that we feel like are critical for our companies to succeed, but more importantly for our community to succeed. And we talked about that of just branding, number one, like, what is manufacturing in Northeast Louisiana? What does it mean to be in manufacturing? Tell the story of what's being manufactured here, right? And then you've got the education and workforce. How are we creating those pipelines? How are we feeding those pipelines? Do we need to redesign? Do we need to tweak? Now with industry at the table, you've got real-time data for your workforce partners going, hey, I need to tweak this or change this, or we've got this new technology coming out, or we're going to do this expansion with these things. And so kind of facilitating that area for that. And
so
then,
let me make sure that I understand that people listening can understand. So you have local manufacturers that are all competing for the same workers, right?
Yep.
I mean, they all would love to have that same person that you're looking to have, but they're smart enough to realize that we are stronger together.
That's right.
Our community can raise up if we're willing to invest in local talent and then educate them. So I think it's great. Even though you guys are competing for the same people, smart enough to say that, look, government's not going to fix our problem. Politicians, if we want the change to happen, we've got to be able to put our yes on the table and back it up with money. So, I mean, if NELA MAC is an organization, I would have to assume these manufacturers had to pull some money together to fund this, at least on some level.
Yeah, so there's a lot of time that's gone into, time and resources on the front end of getting this organization kind of stood up. And really, by the time I joined in February, these leaders have already kind of established the vision for the group. And if I brought anything to the table, it was simply the education piece and these relationships with some of these community members that I'd worked with when I was in Monroe City Schools, to kind of give some fuel to what they had already set forth in the engine.
How many total companies would you say, just roughly, do we have in the NELA MAC organization that's working together?
I would say actively we've got probably 23 to 25 right now.
So 20 plus companies. Yep. So you sent over some information that's the NELA MAC information here, right?
Yeah.
So the thing that caught me off guard, looking at the companies that you have, very diverse set of companies, probably diverse ownership. Yeah. Nobody's all walking lockstep. Everybody's got their own independent way of thinking. Yeah. But that diverse group of professionals, at the very top of this, they started off with faith. Mm-hmm. And then from faith, they didn't go into let's make money. Faith is now it's family. Mm-hmm. And then they didn't start off with the college. They started off with kindergarten through 12th. Mm-hmm. And then through that, they went to post-secondary, business and industry, and governments all the way at the very end. We're not leaning on government to fix this problem for us. That it's our community. If we're willing to put in the work, we can make it happen. I mean, does that pretty much sum up what you're seeing with this organization? Yeah,
I think you've got a group of leaders that are going, hey, we are all trying to reach in the same pool and grab people that we can. And I think we can look back and go, hey, that really hadn't always served us quite well. Like still don't have the workforce that we need now. But as we progress, you start to go, okay, well, how do we look at this differently? You know, how do we go into the faith communities? And that's really what that piece is like, how do you get the churches and the pastors involved? Because historically, we're very siloed, whether by nature or by nurture, right? It just comes instinctively, like what's me and mine, and we do that on a personal level and then ultimately on a professional level. But you've got the faith communities that get in front of audiences across, all of our region. And how do you plug them into this workforce development conversation? And then you've got the families. Like, how do you say, it's easy for me to say, hey, I've got this $50,000 job, but if I don't know how to meet that person where they are and walk them to that $50,000 job, this is no good, right? Yeah. And I think that's the conversation that we're having is you have all these players and these historical silos that have been in place for a long time. How do we start breaking those things down and start figuring out, okay, well, if I want to grow my company 2 times over the next 5 to 10 years, well, I need X number of employees. Well, I'm not going to make enough people in those 5 to 10 years to enter the workforce just by starting today. And so you've got to look at the people that you have in your community. And I think that's the testament is what, yes, there's, you read the news articles and everybody talks about this unemployment rate. I think John Bill Edwards just posted something in July. Our number's the lowest unemployment rate in years, but
they're not in the workforce.
They don't tell the story, right? There's numbers and there's data that aren't included in employment and unemployment. And it's what we call that disconnected population. That's the people that are just existing. And I think that's the heartbreaking thing for me because I see the opportunities. I see, and I'm in conversations all across this community where there's more opportunity today than there ever has been.
Right.
But you've got people that aren't hearing that message. They're not getting that information. And so how do you get companies coming together, join forces, and under the NELA MAC flag, if you would, to say, hey, we're going to take charge because we want to be here. We started our company here. We want to grow our company. We want to expand our company. For industry, it's hard to sustain.
It is.
Right? It's either you're getting better or you're getting worse. It's really hard to plateau. And so in an economy, in a world that we're facing today like we've never faced before, you've got to start thinking about how to continue to grow.
You got to have quality people. You got to have a quality product. You got to be able to produce it the cheapest possible price. Right. Since my adult life, I've seen big corporations manufacture leave out here. The Guide plant was probably one of the biggest that we had in this area left, and it just came down to price. It could be produced cheaper some other place. Yeah. I started my career at the Coca-Cola bottling plant. Was on the operations side of that. And shortly after I left that company and got into real estate, They ended up shutting the plant down and just
100%.
made it a distribution center. And it was all about, I mean, it could be produced cheaper someplace else.
Yep.
So we have to stay on top of things. Something else I want to point out that really kind of, said something to me on the orders with the NELA MAC. You've got, enjoy the journey, which I think is great. Invest in your future you want to see. Engage in the mission. But the fourth one, take the next step.
Yeah.
I think that's a big one that we have missed for way too long.
Mm-hmm.
We have a mentality that we got great ideas. We can put something great on paper, but the execution and the follow-up is lacking in a lot of areas. So if you're not willing to take that next step and then take that next step after that one,
That's right.
we tend to stall out
Yeah.
in a lot of areas. And I think that can be applicable whether it's in our government in starting a business or trying to grow your career to that next level.
Absolutely. Well, I think the next step is the most important, right? Because just like we talked about sustainability, like if I just stay where I'm at, I'm not going to grow, right? And that next step might be uncomfortable. It might be full of fear, and there might be a lot of concerns. There might be some unknowns. You might not know where the next step's going to take you, but it's important that you take the next step. And I think for us as a community, a workforce development program is you've got people at the table.
Mm-hmm.
You've got industry at the table. You've got your K-12 partners, Monroe City School, Ouachita Parish schools, your rural parish schools. They're at the table and they're listening and going, okay, what does industry want and need? Because in all the conversations that I participate in, everybody wants business and industry to lead. And for too many years, we've kind of acted as just a consumer of the organization, right? As kids, they grow up, they go to school, they get out, they go to college, they get some kind of degree, and then we're hoping that some of those degrees that they get, are somewhat work with what we need in industry or business or whatever the sector is that we're in. This model is about being on the front end. We're designing the curriculum because we know what our 5-year plan is, our 10-year plan is. We know where the work is going. We know what industry needs to happen.
Right.
And so being on the front end, you're going, hey, we're a part of this step. We're putting this plan together, and you've got these people at the table. Now, one thing is it's great to be at the table, and it's great to have conversations, and it's great to have opportunities like this to share about these exciting things. But if we just stop here, what's it worth?
It's not worth
right?
anything.
Our community's still going to suffer. And so I think there's a moment now where we're rapidly approaching this next step. And for us, with NELA MAC specifically, and for pulp mill and companies like ours, we've got to kind of roll up our sleeves and get into these training programs. And I think that's where we've got a heavy focus right now as manufacturers is what are our current programs? There's things that are working. There's things that aren't working. And we work closely with Louisiana Delta Community College and ULM in fostering these conversations. And their leadership right now, I think, is pivotal to this next step. It's absolutely critical because you have leaders at both of those institutions that going, hey, whatever you need, whatever that looks like, just tell us how we can help.
Just to have ULM that has a mission statement of eradicating poverty in Northeast Louisiana. I mean, their yes is on the table with it. With them being a public university, and I don't know how politically correct this is, but everybody's fighting for that dollar, right? Everybody's fighting for the dollar. Yeah. But to see the actions that ULM is leading with, it's like it doesn't have to be about ULM. If ULM can get involved to help Delta out to be able to give programs to Delta, or if ULM can give advice to whatever organization it is to make our community better, their yes is on the table, and it shows.
That's
I mean, it's not you're used to. Well, I'm used to getting a lot of lip service, and I think we all are on some level. But we're actually seeing people being able to put action behind the words. Yeah. So I'm seeing it firsthand. Yeah. What would you say? And you may not have a gauge on it. What's the deficit of manufacturing jobs that we have here? I know healthcare. I mean, we're struggling big time. I think the last number I heard, Northeast Louisiana, we're short like 400 physicians. Yeah. On the manufacturing side, right now, I mean, is there any idea of kind of how many jobs we're missing?
Yeah, we're actually in the process of surveying our members, if you would, as far as the manufacturers go, and try to figure that out. But just some rough numbers. I think between just 4 or 5 companies that come off in conversations that we've had. You're talking about a couple hundred people. And so I would say when you scale that to the region, it's not to think that you've got several hundred immediate job openings right now. And that's like, for our company, that's immediate. That's just to do the work that we've already got.
This podcast is possible because of your support of our real estate business. If you're looking to buy, sell, or invest in real estate, I'm confident we have the tools and the processes to help you reach your real estate goal. For more information or to reach out to us, check out the podcast description for our contact info.
Not to mention the work that we want to get and the expansions that we want to have happen. And so I know there's several companies right now in this community that are going, I need people now, but also going to need people in a year and 2 years from now because of this strategic plan that we have to grow our company.
It's interesting that you mentioned that. You mentioned it earlier that people want to see those new buildings go up. We can get really excited about a new company coming in to produce 200 jobs, and everybody's like, want to throw a ticker tape parade, we get one of those in. But we have that right now.
We do.
We have that right now, and probably plus some if we can get the message out to people. What do you think if you had to nail down probably the top 3 skills that we have a deficit in, is there a way that you can kind of narrow down some of the skill sets that we're looking for to kind of really give it a boost?
Yeah, I mean, right now, if you it's hard to narrow it down, but I know there's a lot of need for operators, and that is a very broad term. And operators, from operating equipment to a certain type of machinery to running a production line. And that's somebody that is just willing to learn that operation and that specific, it might be a certain set of skills that they might do over and over and over again, but it's part of that production process.
Sure.
So you've got those operators. And then you've got the maintenance side. And that's where, for us and companies like ours is, we play a lot in the maintenance and the service and the
because
construction
that's
side.
a huge skill set because when that piece of equipment goes down, that dollar clock starts ticking. I can remember at the Coke plant when production shut down, there was a calculation that was done that it's costing the company this much money every minute.
That's right.
That line is not producing or producing to the speed it's supposed to produce to.
And so the industry has kind of evolved from years and years back where it was like, well, we're just going to run it till it breaks. And when it breaks, we'll fix it.
That preventive maintenance.
You've got a lot of preventive maintenance happening now. Well, when you put that into your corporate strategy for companies like Drax and Graphic Packaging and Weyerhaeuser and Lamb Weston and all these major companies in our region, that's part of their plan. Well, they have down days and outage plans and maintenance schedules that they have to keep. So when they can't have enough people internally, they sub that work out to contractors like ourselves. And so we're all fishing for the same skill sets. And what they can't provide internally, they outsource. And so it's this operations of running the process and running the equipment and doing the things. But it's also over here this maintenance and what we'd call kind of millwright type people that can take something, service it, and if it does break, they can get it back operational quickly. And I think that's where a lot of our conversations right now across the industry is like, maintenance isn't going away. That's not a problem that we're going to solve. And, we can never have more people when it comes to that. And that's, I've shared that in a couple of conversations, is if we can get this workforce piece not fixed, because it'll never be fixed, but if we can take some strong strides as a community that, hey, we're really committed to this and we're not going to have to recruit companies to come here. We're not going to have to do the dog and pony shows with economic development groups to come in and say, well, why Monroe? Why West Monroe? Why Northeast Louisiana? We'll be doing the interviews. Do we want you here?
Right.
Do you fit our culture? And I think that's a message that this community needs to be empowered by, is because if we can work on this workforce and we have a qualified, well-trained workforce, business and industry is going to come here. And I'll tell you that I had a conversation last week with a company, and they're a major impact to our community. And the comment was made, we're planning on doing numerous expansions, and we're looking all over the country. We're going to go to the community that is servicing and meeting our needs. And I wasn't the only one in that conversation. But I know as a citizen, I'm going, we better hold them to that. because they're looking all across this country to find a community that's going to meet their workforce needs and meet their needs as a company.
That's a sense of urgency for us.
That's right. And so you get that message out there and you say, hey, look, we know what we've done in the past, but we also know that there's great things happening all around and across this region. And I think the focus and conversations with Roy is, how do we break down these silos? How do we get rid of these silos and we start to bring people together in this collaborative effort like never before? And it's difficult and it's rough. And we've had several meetings and conversations with a lot of different organizations, and everybody's still very protective of what I've built or what I've done or my group or my things.
Right.
But we're starting to see some progress. We're starting to see people go, hey, that does make sense. We can really go further by partnering and collaborating in this space versus just having a us and this is what we do and this is what we do.
Because I don't think we're so unique than other communities. It's I think it's human nature that within us that protectionism has to come in. It's like,
right.
I don't want anybody to take what I've got.
That's right.
So I think if we can get past that quicker than other communities, it's going to give us a competitive advantage.
Yep.
So what did it? I read something recently where Ouachita Parish decided that they're going to throw their hat in the ring and say we're going to get behind this, and they put some money out. I think maybe $250,000 towards this.
Yeah.
What kind of impact does that have?
Well, I mean, for us, when we started meeting with NELA MAC and kind of laying out, like I said, I joined, several months after they'd already gotten established, and they said, these are things we want to work on. And I was like, that's great. Let's, this is what it looks like. And started to kind of put this plan in place. And it was a conversation at a NELA MAC meeting. We had a quarterly meeting at Steel Fabricators, and one of the people in the room was a representative of the police jury. And we were going through our marketing campaign, what we wanted to do, tell our story. And at that point, we weren't looking for support. We were fully prepared to say, this is what we want to accomplish, and we hope you would join us in it, but this is where we're going, right? And we went down the list from marketing to education and workforce to the Children's Museum and community engagement piece. And one of those representatives stepped outside and he made a phone call. And I don't know who he called, but he came back. He said, you need to put all this together and come present this to the police jury. And so that's what we started working on. I think a couple of weeks later, we had we sent some information, kind of put a draft of what we would want to accomplish and what some metrics would be behind that, and submitted that to the police jury. And I haven't been in the political space. I've been in the public education space, and kind of they've crossed paths from time to time.
Sure.
But as a citizen of Ouachita Parish, what the police jury did was game-changing. And what I mean by that is they didn't just kind of come alongside and pat us on the back and say, y'all go get it. They said, here's some money. Here's how we want to support and we want to help you do that, right? And I thought that really spoke volumes to the jurors, individual jurors, and then collectively as a police jury, what that meant for business and industry to say, hey, they don't want to come in and take over the show and tell us how to do what we want to do.
They want to lift you up.
They want to lift you up and say, we want to support you. And so Shane Smiley and that entire group of police juries, I think, have stepped up in a profound way. And what we've seen from that in the NELA MAC side is you've got other community members going, hey, we want to be a part. Hey, we want to help. We want to do this. We want to do that. And it's helped fostered some conversations that we weren't having with both Friday Ellis and Stacy Mitchell. I mean, their leadership in both of those cities is critical for the success of the region. And so to sit down and say, this is what we want to try to do, their message back was, how can we help? And so I think from a civic side, for the civic leaders in our region to recognize what industry needs and what industry wants to do to kind of meet our needs, to say, hey, we want to help. We want to foster those conversations. If there's some funds that we can put in, great. If there's some funds outside of here that we can pull in, great. And that's what a lot of opportunity is. There's more dollars, and I've seen this and I share this, is there's more dollars coming out into the system from the federal government right now.
Yeah.
And people are like, well, that's so good of the federal government to do that. Well, don't mistake, those are our dollars just coming back to us. Right?
Yeah, I did an interview with Chris Kelly here a while back, and we were talking about various struggles that we have. And he was pretty clear on one thing, is that we don't have a money problem right now.
That's right.
We don't have a money problem. We can look at other things as being our problem, but it's not a money problem, because the money's there to help things get off the ground, but it's going to take the people doing it. It's going to take rolling up the sleeves. It's going to take changing our thought process through it. Now, I know that we, from an economic development standpoint, there's been a shift from, the North Louisiana Economic Board to something that's more focused in Northeast Louisiana. But it seems like we have a lot of economic development pieces that are kind of scattered around. What do you think would help? Do you have an opinion on, if I'm not trying to get you to dive too deep into politics, but if you could say, hey, look, guys, all groups over here, if there's one thing that you feel like they can really help make an impact in our area, what would that one thing be?
Yeah, it's hard to say, but I'll tell you, just kind of before, is it would be wrong of me to come in 2023 and start pointing fingers.
Sure.
But if I can look back throughout the years across this region, somebody in some group of some organization in some corner of the state saw a need, and they figured out, hey, nobody else is going to help me, so I'm going to start this thing. And this thing might be a United Way type program, or a workforce program, or this program or that program. And so that's why we see all these little sparks, is because over the years people were like, well, who's doing it? Now the conversation needs to shift, and we need to go, okay, well, treat those areas as satellite offices. You've already got a footprint, right? NELA MAC, and I don't think whoever the new economic development organization is, comes in and tries to shut things down. It needs to be a collaborative effort.
They need a partnership.
That's right. They need to come in and say, hey, we love what you're doing. How do we collaborate to make it bigger, more impactful, so it can reach more people, right? But we can't say, well, everybody does this, this, and this. We've created the siloed ecosystem out of nature or nurture, right? And so when we think about that, I think moving forward, from an economic development, there's no bigger investment in economic development than workforce. And you can travel the country and you can go to every seminar you want to go in, and they can tell you about all these sites and all these things. When you look at Northeast Louisiana right now, we've got the interstates, we've got the rivers, we've got the ULMs, we've got the Louisiana Techs, we've got the Gramblings, we've got the Louisiana Delta Community Colleges. There's 8 campuses across this entire region. We have all the ingredients. And so it's hard to come in and say, man, we really need to do this one big thing. Because the one big thing that everybody thinks is like this mega site, or this thing or that thing, or the ribbon cutting and the ticker tape parade, like you said earlier. Really, the one big thing we need to do is work together.
I agree.
Is come to the table and say, hey, I have these resources, right? I have these things. I have 15, 20 years working in this part of the state.
How do you organize it?
Well, you got to get the message out. Because I think one thing is...
And I hope we're doing that today.
Well, that's the goal, is you have opportunities like this to kind of, make that call. Like, hey, we're at the table. But I sit with Terry Mitchell, with Workforce Board in the rural parish. I sit with Doretha Bennett with Ouachita Parish. And I sit with the Workforce Commission and their team. And I have all these conversations. And you have great people in Northeast Louisiana that want the absolute best for Northeast Louisiana. But they'll tell you, they've been doing this a long time. And it always comes to this critical mass where personal things get in the way, or my mentality,
we got to tear that down,
starts to take over. And so I think from a leadership standpoint, what Mayor Ellis and Mayor Mitchell have done, like, don't let the river divide us, and we're taking some steps there. I think from there's a pastors group that meets, and they're from all over the area, and they said, look, we're not going to let race, religion get in the way. We're going to figure out how to work together and build this community. And I think if we can, as a region, rally around this one vision, this one goal, which is simply raising Northeast Louisiana up, that's how you get people to collaborate. The other way, and I hate to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
But the other way is there's something to be said about a leader, right? And everybody looks to a leader, and there's some recognition that I've been given that I absolutely don't deserve because this isn't a one-man show.
Sure.
The most important position, that leadership has some responsibilities. But that first follower is critical to get the rest behind them, right? So whoever that leader is, it's not a mayor, it's not a governor, it's not this, like whatever that message is that's getting spread, it's going to take that first follower. And that first follower could be a community organization. It could be a mayor. It could be a business leader. It could be, anybody across this community. Because when that one person buys in, the next one is what kind of creates the chain reaction.
Sure.
And I think that's where we're getting to in our community, is if you got the people at the table, we've kind of shared, like, okay, workforce is something we can all rally around, right? We can get behind this message and let that be the lead. And then this organization ties in, and this organization ties in, and this organization ties in. And it's going to create a chain reaction because ultimately, as human nature, we all want to be a part of something. And we want to be a part of something that's successful.
Absolutely.
Right? That's just our nature. And so you think about that on a workforce development scale. That's the opportunity that we have in Northeast Louisiana.
You did a podcast with Quentin Durr and Roy. And Quentin said something that really spoke to me, and I believe it to be true. And I'm paraphrasing here. That teachers would use the thread that, if you don't go to college, you're going to work at the chicken plant.
Yeah.
I don't know when the shift happened where trades were not as valued as, having a college degree.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that some of the wealthiest people I know that in our community got their wealth from a trade that they performed,
That's right.
whether they started a business or, from plumber to electrician to, you name it. And I'm not knocking any of those things, but every kid is not designed or has a passion to go to college.
That's right.
One of the biggest hurdles that we have in real estate today is going to be the student loan debt. And so many of those people that have the debt never graduated from anything, never got a degree from it, but are sitting with $20,000, $40,000 worth of debt, but had really nothing to show for it at that point.
Yeah.
How do we change the narrative within our school system for that educational path? And how do we address that? Because, it used to be based on kind of, let's just take the paper mill, for example. When I was coming up, kids my age that their parents worked at the paper mill, that's where they were wanting to go. They believed, and that's where their destiny was. Their parents made a good living, and they were heading to the paper mill. It wasn't a negative thing necessarily. But just like he said, it is kind of still viewed as, oh, you're going to be a factory worker.
Yeah.
Have you seen what some of these factory workers make? You have somebody that is a mechanic in one of these factories that is good at what they do. Tell me that individual doesn't make a good living.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So how do we change that? How do we change that within our school system? But I think it's actually going to really start before there. How do we change that in the home?
Yeah. That's always a challenge. Is it starts in the home, and it starts with that parental awareness. And unfortunately, as a society right now where we are, we have more fatherless homes than we ever have in history. And that alone is detrimental to the growth in society. But what it does is you've got a lot of single moms that are doing the absolute best that they can to raise up these kids. But when you get so busy raising the kid, you don't have time to sit down and go, here's all the opportunities. It's like this fight to survive. And while somebody's in survival mode, they can't think about anything else. They can't wish and dream and hope for something better because they're just trying to figure out, like, am I going to make it today? And when I was in education, and it still just kind of gives me chills, but right now we've got babies across this community that are going to leave their schools on Friday, and they're not going to eat until Monday morning if community partners don't support and offer these resources. And it's 2023.
I know.
Right? And some people across this community, I think, are unaware of that fact, that sometimes we kind of live in our own bubbles and we think like, it's not that bad. It is that bad.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have absolute babies when they eat lunch on Friday. If that school's not giving out lunches to put in their bag
backpack,
and groceries to take with them when they leave school on Friday,
they're
not going to eat till breakfast Monday morning. And so when you understand that's a reality for people, it makes this conversation of how do we get this message across and how do we make this change a little bit more difficult. But I think I think the challenge is on the education piece. If you're a lifelong educator, that needs to be celebrated. But it's just like if I'm a lifelong X, then that's all I know, right? And so for our schools and our school board members and our school district staff, a lot of them have been there for a long time. And all they know is education.
Right.
They know showing up at 7, the bell rings at this time, and they work on 50-minute blocks. That's when I got out of education, I had to change my mind. I was working on 50-minute schedules, and I knew that my lunch was from 11:23 to 11:53, and like this is the time that I had. That's hard to understand when you're not in education. And so the comments about, the blue collar jobs, well, people equate like sweat and hard work with a less desirable career.
Mm-hmm.
But go back in history, not just the U.S. history, but the history of the world. It took tradesmen and craftsmen of all kinds to build the most powerful nations that this world's ever seen.
Right.
Right? And so I think when you said, like, where did we lose track and lose focus of that thing, it's in the U.S., we're very spoiled.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We have a lot of things, and if you don't travel outside the U.S., you really don't know how good you've got it. But you go in and you grow up, and it's, hey, everybody's going this way, and we're going here. And even when I was in school, I mean, if it wasn't for an athletic scholarship, I wouldn't have gone to college. Not that I probably couldn't go through college, obviously from a smart sense, but just that wasn't on my real radar. Like I was thinking about how to go into to be a firefighter or work in the community or do something, find something to do. But we've kind of shifted some period of years ago into this everybody's going to university track. And that's a detriment in itself. But what really started the conversation that really got bad is we started separating college and career.
Mm-hmm.
And those two words began to be kind of like enemies of the other.
Right.
Like if you're going the career track, well, you're not smart enough to go to university. Or if you're going to university, well, you're too good to do these careers out here with these trades. And that never should have happened. I don't know when it happened, but I'd like to go figure out sometime back in the time machine, like when did that happen to stop that from happening?
Mm-hmm.
Because where we are now, and I think this is the conversation, I shared that in that podcast, everybody's on a career track.
Yep.
It might take me 4 years. It might take me 14 years. But ultimately, our goal as citizens, as parents, as school board leaders, as teachers, as educators across the community, we want our babies to be on a career track
Mm-hmm.
that they're going to go into some kind of living wage career so that they can do what?
Support themselves, support their family.
That's right. Pay taxes, buy groceries, buy a house, buy cars here. Because every time they do that, it goes into the community.
Correct.
Right? And so this mindset, we've got the opportunity now. I think COVID revealed a lot of things.
It did.
And COVID's got a bad rep and absolutely devastated homes and industries and businesses across this community, but it also revealed some truths to us. And I think one of those is we've had a workforce development problem for a long time.
Mm-hmm. And it's not going to get fixed overnight.
That's right.
And I'm not naive to that fact, but I appreciate you saying that this has to start in the home. And although based on how a lot of our homes are structured nowadays, we're not going to have the advantage that we had 20 years ago to really take a hold of that. But we shouldn't give up on it.
Mm-mm.
We're going to have to get in our K through 12. And I think do some re-education to the educators.
Yeah.
To start guiding these kids. And I'm not saying steering a kid, oh, he's not smart enough to go to
That's
college, we need to get him on this path, but to present options to them, to let
Yeah.
them know these things are available to you. You don't have to go this path. You don't have to go this path, but explore.
Yeah.
Figure out what's going to work for you. We've got to get the trades back into our high schools. I think every high school should have the opportunity to have to be able to meet a need that is needed within our community to give our kids options.
Yeah.
And that training needs to be quality training.
Yeah.
Not every school is going to be right for manufacturing, but
Right.
we've got kids now that are in some medical training that's in the schools. We've got agricultural design. We've got a lot of different things, and I think bringing that back is going to help not only manufacturing, but our community as a whole.
Yeah.
We need to destigmatize
That's right.
our kids going down a career path into a trade that's going to be productive members of our society. So if you could say that there is an area that the community can help and get behind and support this, what would that be?
Yeah.
I know it's kind of a big ask, but what is it that, and look, this ask may change in 6 months or a year, but right now,
Yeah.
what can the community do to get behind this to help show the support and be able to say, I'm ready to take that next step with you?
Yeah. So obviously on the manufacturing side, we want to talk about our jobs, but our industry is not unique in struggling for employees. So you have the healthcare industry, you got the hospitality industry, you've got the manufacturing and construction space, you've got professional services. And my wife's a CPA, and they need accountants, they need CPAs, they need accounting staff in their office in a serious way. And so you have all of these sectors, from small business to large corporations across this community, that really the message I think everybody would like to be shared is it's okay to work. Like, we can take pride in working an honest day's work for an honest day's wage. And the American dream was not everybody's going to be multi-gazillionaires. The American dream is that you're going to be able to provide and live in a safe country and provide for your family and build this house and buy this house and live a well life in whatever circumstance you find yourself. Some people think the American dream means you have to have $1 gazillion, and anything less than that is failure.
Right.
And so I think what most industry would like to say is be proud to work. Like, when you wake up in the morning and you put your feet on the floor, like, know that you're going to have an impact on this economy. Whether you're sweeping the floors or you're sitting in the CEO seat, every person along that chain has a critical impact to the community and the economy in Northeast Louisiana. And I think, if, without getting into the details, let's just be okay and be proud to work. Like, bring that back where we could say, hey, look, I work for a living. I do this for a living. This is my profession. These are the things that I'm going to be a part of. And I have a heart for education, obviously, for those years, and I don't want people to hear me and mistake me. We've got educators that absolutely want the best for our students. And I think that community, the support that we can give to that community is yes, support your schools, support your local schools and your local programs, and do all those things, right? Buy the ads and the banners and do all the stuff. But more than that, there's going to come an opportunity in this conversation to where policy needs to change. Because you start talking about these programs, and we need more trade programs, we need more workforce. Well, that's talking at the educators. You got to sit in the educator's seat and understand that there's current policies out of Baton Rouge that are detrimental to that work. Not maliciously, not was intended, but it was the way the accountability system is set up that makes it very difficult for school systems to be successful, right? We all have a need to succeed.
That's correct.
We all want to be successful. So for the school systems, there's this accountability system. And LDOE, Department of Education, and BESI, and the Board of Regents, all of those
you're saying
groups.
now. I mean, you've got this track that they put these kids on, that all these teachers are being graded on.
That's it.
And now you're going to have a school over here that's going to, enact a program that this school is going to say, well, look, we're not comparing apples to apples, and I'm getting kind of penalized here. So we have some changes that need to happen at state level.
And so I think there's a conversation that's coming. And I've had an opportunity to meet with Dr. Kay Brumley, the State Superintendent of Education for Louisiana. And I think, he's a lifetime educator. And he wants the best for our students, and he wants the best for business and industry, because I know he's getting pressured, to say, hey, who are you graduating? How are they graduating? Are they qualified? But there's going to be a chance, and there's already conversations that I've had and that we'll continue to have in Northeast Louisiana to say, hey, can we rethink this, right? Like, industry's at the table. We're willing to tell you the programs that we need. Can you help us help our school districts to be successful? Because at the end of the day, we can pour into those K-12 systems, but if we don't change the accountability piece, or at least have an impact on the grading, how they are proved to be successful, then it's going to be an uphill climb. And then the last thing I would say is, just from a community standpoint, is sometimes, and we were talking about this in Bible study on Monday morning, sometimes we get discouraged because we're in the fight. And I don't think it needs to be that way. Workforce development is a grind. Mm-hmm. It's like you have good days, you got bad days. Right. Like, there's days that we come out and we feel like, man, we've really took a huge step forward.
Sure.
And then there's days going like, man, is this ever going to change? But being okay as a community with being in the fight, like everybody saying, hey, we're at the table and we're going to start pushing. And we're going to have good days and bad days and the ups and downs. Like, as a community, let's be okay with being in the fight, because we know ultimately we continue to fight, continue to push, continue to move forward, that next step, that next step, that next step. We're going to look back in 3 years and 5 years and 10 years and go, boy, I'm so glad we started walking, right? I'm so glad that we started taking that step. Because if we don't do it, I'm afraid of what's going to happen to our community. Yeah. We're going to be another interstate town. And I don't think
I don't want to see it happen in my town.
Nobody wants to see it.
I mean, this is where I grew up. I've never lived any place other than Ouachita Parish.
That's right.
Half my life on one side of the river, half on the other. The river doesn't matter to me. Yeah. But I think you're right. Taking that next step, in business for me, consistency matters. If you don't have a consistent product, people are not going to stick with it. As a community, if we're not going to be consistent in this fight for our community, we're not going to be successful at it. So I know that a lot of what you do is more on a corporate level, and I know you're going to have to be dealing with the state to try to work on changing some of this. But at some point, do you envision that the community is going to get more updates from you guys to when it's time for us to roll our sleeves up and jump in and call our legislator and say, look, all right, we got a plan. Now we need you to get on board with our plan because our kids matter to us. Our community matters to us. Yeah. I mean, is that part of the process? Do you see that happening soon, or we still kind of early stages before we're ready to take that fight to the state level?
Well, I think ultimately you want to plan well so that you can execute well.
Sure.
And we've done a lot of planning, and in a short amount of time when you think about the work that's ahead of us. But again, there's already work that's been happening, and there's already people that's in place, and I think that's where we can really see the process begin to expedite is because we have the university, we have the technical colleges, you've got these partners already in the community that are in place, that are at the table, that are ready to get to work. And so what we hope to happen is, for NELA MAC specifically, is we're working on a website piece, and that website is like the central location for all things manufacturing.
Okay,
and that website just points people to the resources that are already in, because that's the hardest thing. I didn't know about that, right? I didn't know y'all were doing that. I didn't know that was available. So this centralized piece, and I think the Monroe Chamber and the city of Monroe and the city of West Monroe, and everybody's kind of taking that same approach, is how can I get more information into the fingertips of our citizens and do it in this way. And so bringing that awareness into the manufacturing sector specifically is one thing that we're doing. But we've got quarterly NELA MAC meetings where we have all our industry partners to the table and our support partners around, and we share about the work that we're doing. And so some of those steps are, we've got an expo that's coming up September 11th, NELA Career Expo, and it's partnered with not just manufacturers but all industry sectors, and getting businesses to sign up. We're going to host it at the ULM Coliseum.
Oh, fantastic.
And that's going to be for high school, 10th grade and 12th grade, but schools are going to send whoever they want to send. But the goal is that 10th grade year, those students are the ones making that decision on which track that they're going because of the current system. And so we want to bring industry and our post-secondary partners in to say, hey, you want to go do this, you want to go do that, here's how you do that. And so they're coming in. And then you've got your seniors who are getting ready to start their senior year right now. And they've got the full year and fun, and it's my last year of high school. But there's a real deadline coming in May. And that deadline is like, hey, you're no longer going to be here anymore, right? You're going to be somewhere. And so as a community, there's an opportunity for us to help kind of bridge that gap into that somewhere. And we want to do that with post-secondaries, and we want to do that with our workforce partners. And so getting that information and sharing that information out there, we're trying to do that. One thing is how do we reach the most people? And so looking at social media and podcast and these ways to TikTok and all the stuff that most of us, like I don't know how it all operates, but I understand that that's what people are going to.
Sure.
So how do we get our message into those platforms and start shedding light into these areas?
Well, I truly believe that we have a community that is that wants to change. I think we have a community that's ready to get involved and see the change happen. So I'm very inspired that we have someone like you that has decided to roll their sleeves up and say that I'm going to take that next step, and I'm going to bring others with me that's willing to take that next step. So, and I know that there's tons of people behind the scenes that are part of this to help make it happen. You, for whatever reason, have kind of been chosen to kind of be the pretty face of it all and kind of help lead that charge. And man, I'm really thankful that you came in to kind of just share with us your heart for our community and the passion that you have to make people feel like a career path is a career path, and we don't have to have these mansions that are probably for most of us are never attainable. It's just a pie in the sky thing that's out there, and it's okay to be able to go to work at 8 o'clock in the morning and get off at 5. It's okay to be able to sweat while you're at work and come home and be able to play with your kids, have the toys that you want in the garage, and just enjoy life. So, Matt, thank you for putting your yes on the table and being willing to help fight that fight for our community. I know our community is grateful for you, and I'm glad I got to get this information from you today. It's just, I'm going to say one last thing. I would be willing to bet that most people have no idea how many manufacturing facilities we have in this area.
That's right.
We just don't know what we don't know. So hopefully today we opened up some eyes, and I can't wait to see where the next few years take us. I think we have a very bright future, and I'm ready to see it happen.
Well, I appreciate your time and excited to see the future in Northeast Louisiana.
Man, thank you for your time today. Thank you for taking the time to watch or listen to this podcast. We really appreciate your involvement. Please leave us a comment, or even better yet, subscribe to this podcast and hit that notification bell so that you can be alerted for every new episode when it hits.